Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of the SoBros Hot Minute. Of course, I am Stoney Keeley, the EIC at SoBrosNetwork.com. This one's going out to my fellow pro wrestling fans out there today. I want to talk about a few guys that I didn't appreciate as a child. And this is addressing the maturation of one's wrestling fanhood, right? When I was younger, it was about those grandiose storylines, the larger-than-life characters, the twists, the turns, the outfits, the promos, all of that stuff. It was about the characters. I had no clue who was an actual good worker or not back then. But once you get older and you get a little closer to it, you learn a little bit more about the industry, you watch more, you consume more wrestling, you engage with other wrestling fans, you start to kind of learn the ropes a little bit. Is that a pun? Should I say no pun intended for that? I don't know. The more I thought about it, the more I went back and watched old wrestling throughout the years, and I kind of found a few guys that I became really big fans of that I didn't appreciate as a kid. So I'm going to do this Mount Rushmore style, as we are off to do here on the SoBros Hot Minute and really on the SoBros Network podcast as a whole. The first name that comes to mind is Big Van Vader. As a kid, Vader was a scary guy. I remember seeing him on Boy Meets World and thinking, like, this is not a human, And then the rivalry with Shawn Michaels, he just looks like a monster. But his work during that run is not emblematic of the work that he put in throughout his career. I think he's one of the best, most underrated big men of all time. I think he had a style at the time, I'm looking at it as this big, scary man, but like growing to appreciate his work, man, fucking brutal. Tough as nails, just hard-nosed physical wrestling. Like there's a certain purity to the way that Vader worked that you just don't see too often. In that same vein, I would also go with Bam Bam Bigelow. I love going back and watching his stuff. I always thought he was, as a kid, I remember the flame tights and thinking, oh, that's pretty cool, but not really understanding how good he really was. To be his size and to pull off some of the shit that he did was incredible. Just seeing kind of like how steady he was and some of his promos that I didn't appreciate as a kid. I kind of drawn to Bam Bam Bigelow a little bit. I lied. I just thought of a fifth guy that I'd want to mention. Up next, I would go with Terry Funk. As a kid, I didn't get the appeal of Terry Funk. Didn't understand why people liked him so much. And then even as an adult, was never really on my radar until I started seeing friends that I met through going to independent wrestling shows talk about how awesome he was and how underrated he was. And then you go back and watch some of that stuff. And man, I would absolutely put him in that class of performers with like, the Dusty Rhodes and the Ric Flairs, guys that could cut it on the mic and then go out there and just deliver a barn burner in the ring. Like Terry Funk, all-time great. And I don't know that he's considered in that category by and large by the wide wrestling fan community, but I think the smart ones know. The smart ones know that he belongs in that conversation. I would also mention Greg the Hammer Valentine. I love watching Greg the Hammer Valentine go. He was a guy that kind of just was just kind of in the shuffle when I was a kid, watching old WrestleMania tapes. Like I never really understood why he was featured so prominently on the card and why he was around so often, if you will. But going back and watching some of his stuff as an adult, man, the guy he just didn't miss. It was just really good stuff. And then the guy that I thought of as I was recording this in that same vein, Chris Candido, right? And, as a kid growing up in the 90s, I knew Chris Candido as Skip, the Body Donnas. And that is just not indicative of who he was. I think Chris Candido is one of those great what ifs. Obviously, untimely death. But if he had kept going, like, would he have one day gotten to the stratosphere, like the way that people look at Dean Malenko, I think of among wrestling fans, where never really made it to that upper echelon of wrestling stardom, but was considered one of the best at what he does. I think Chris Candido, man, what could have been. It ain't all Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold Steve Austin in the wrestling world. And I would say if you were like me and grew up in that era and never went back to find new guys to appreciate in different ways, I'd say go down that rabbit hole one weekend. And if you're not a wrestling fan, I have no idea why you're still tuned in. So have a nice day.